Hey leaders, thanks so much for watching again. We are back to normal Sunday night youth group this week. It's been a few weeks. We've had youth banquet, we've had water day, we've had all sorts of great things happening to kick off our summer. But we are back with regular Sunday night youth group. And just our leadership reminder for this week is summer is a great chance to connect with your students outside of regularly scheduled programs. Now try to set aside some time this summer to get your group together for some casual hangout time and relaxation. And here's the thing, if you're already doing something around the town, it's easy to just invite a few of your youth or your whole group to tag along with you. Are you already going to the beach for something? Invite a few of your students or invite your group. Are you shopping for an afternoon? Invite your group to tag along maybe if that's something that you'd be able to do. Apps like GroupMe and Facebook make impromptu gatherings much more easier to communicate. Just remember to make sure that parents are aware and you have enough adults to keep it safe. This week, like I said, we're back to regular youth group and we kick off a brand new series for 4 weeks. It's called Activate. Now, think about science. It's amazing how adding just a few drops of one chemical can create a reaction, but adding just a few drops of another chemical can stop or deactivate that same reaction. Now, maybe the coolest part about all of this science is that you can't tell by looking at a chemical what reaction it will cause. Maybe it's an activator, maybe it's a deactivator, maybe it's neither. That's why science is fascinating. The only way to know is to keep testing it out and see what happens. Believe it or not, this is something faith and science have in common. We all experience moments that have potential to activate our faith or deactivate our faith. And it's hard to tell sometimes at first glance whether what's happening will help you or hurt you in your faith. And this week we're going to talk about one of those things. So I want to tell you a quick story. When I was in middle school, I had a math test, and I don't math well now, and I didn't math well back then, and I decided to cheat on my math test because my mom would always reward me for getting A's on my test. And I don't know what got into me, but I actually went through with it, and I got an A. But for me, though, it kind of stole the joy of winning. I didn't feel pride or accomplishment. I felt guilt, and a lot of guilt. It's that knot in the pit of your stomach when you know you've made a mistake. It's that weight on your shoulders when you know you've said or done something you shouldn't have. That's guilt. And it always seems to show up when we do something wrong. No matter where it comes from, guilt is a powerful thing. It can leave us with a lingering sense of frustration and disappointment because we know we aren't living the way we should be, and those feelings can make us want to throw in the towel and give up. Sometimes that looks like avoiding whatever makes you feel guilty. And one thing we all tend to do when we're feeling guilty is we back away from our relationship with God. We talk about God, but we avoid talking to God. Either way, we do what we can to create distance, and we let guilt deactivate our faith. But what if I told you it didn't have to be that way? This week, we're going to take a look at Peter, one of Jesus' closest disciples and a very key leader in the early church. He left behind his career and everything familiar to him to follow Jesus, and because of that, he wanted to get things right. Peter wanted Jesus to know just how committed he was to him. The story we're talking about takes place during Passover. And the disciples didn't know it, but this meal was the last time they would have Jesus and a meal together before Jesus was arrested and eventually killed. Jesus knew it was coming, and after dinner he made a huge statement. He said, "All of you will desert me, but after I'm raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee and meet you there." Now, that's some little bit of awkward dinner talk, but not only did Jesus say something about dying, he said the guys who have been by his side for the past 3 years were going to bail on him. Now, Peter was especially rattled. And typical of his personality, Peter spoke up and made sure everyone knew how devoted he was to Jesus. Peter said to him, "Even if everyone else deserts you, I never will." And that's in Mark chapter 14:28. So what Jesus says next no doubt came as a huge shock to Peter. Jesus speaks directly to him, and paraphrasing, he says, "Hey, not so fast, Peter. You're actually going to deny your belief in me 3 times before the sun even rises tomorrow." Now, Peter's really ready to raise the stakes, so he says, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you." And within hours, Peter lied 3 times on 3 separate occasions about his connection to Jesus. Peter denied knowing him. He disowned Jesus and deserted him just as Jesus said he would. And the book of Mark goes on to tell us when Peter realized what he had done, he wept. Can you imagine how he must have felt? He let Jesus down. He let his friends down. How could he not feel guilty? Simply put, he messed up. But the story isn't over. And we pick up the story in the book of John. Jesus has risen from the dead and shown up to meet his disciples just like he said he would. And you know who's there with him? Peter. And this is huge because Peter could have given up and let his guilt deactivate his faith, but he didn't do that. Peter showed up, he didn't quit, he was present with Jesus, and Jesus honored his willingness to try again. After his resurrection, Jesus singles Peter out and asks him 3 times if Peter loves him. 3 times. The same number of times Peter denied Jesus before his death. That's no coincidence. Jesus gives Peter a second chance to make things right. When someone does that, it's called grace. And this time, Peter gets it right. He says, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus replies to Peter with an invitation to keep following him. He says, "Feed my lambs, feed my sheep, and follow me." John chapter 21, 15, 17, and 19. With each word, Jesus is extending grace to Peter right in front of our eyes. Why? Because here's what Jesus knew then, and here's what he knows now. Grace is greater than guilt. Because of grace, we can come back. We don't have to hide or run away. We don't have to feel guilty. We will feel guilty, and that's a healthy conscience from God. But instead of it driving us away from God, it can drive us towards his grace. Think of it like chemistry. When 2 chemicals connect, something always happens. It activates something. And so when it comes to guilt, consider this formula. Guilt plus grace equals gratitude. See, guilt can deactivate your faith. It can drive us away from Jesus and the church. But when we embrace God's grace in the equation and sticking around instead of running away, something new happens. Guilt plus grace equals gratitude, and that gratitude is what keeps us showing up and moving forward in our faith. So as we head out this Sunday, remember that no matter how many promises you make to God, you're going to get it wrong sometimes. But when you do, remind yourself that you have access to the only thing that can turn your guilt into something good. You have access to grace, and grace is greater than guilt. So we'll see you this Sunday at 4:45 for our small group leader meeting. Just want to touch base, pray together, get geared up for youth group since it's been a couple weeks. So we'll see you there 4:45 off the lobby classroom. Thanks, guys. Bye.